All right, we're here in the GCU basketball practice facility, the new home of Winston Gandy, who has just been introduced as the new women's basketball head coach of the Lopes. Winston, welcome to the Lopes.
Thank you.
And you have an amazing background of places you've been, the Final Four Maryland team that you started with, and moving on to programs where you were at Duke's best season in a decade, and Rice's success, and then South Carolina national championship. What have you drawn from being at those successful programs?
Well, I think you've seen it different parts, different programs. We're at different stages. Obviously, Maryland, their perennial postseason play. And then obviously what it kind of took to kind of break through I think it was like 2 or 3 Final Fours in 3 or 4 years. And then obviously with Rice, obviously they were trying to get to an NCAA berth. And seeing what that looks like, trying from rebuilding a program, if you will. And then obviously with Duke, obviously that was during COVID, and it was more of a rebuild, and to take it where we did, at the time, and has been great. Then obviously with South Carolina, everybody thought, they graduated the freshies, and there was a lot of unknowns, but some people still had those expectations. So kind of seeing how, Dawn was able to defy that. Did we think we were going to go undefeated? Absolutely not. But, it's one of those things, a testament to her. And when you have a good foundation, that can carry you a long way, which she showed.
Yeah. And when you were a student at Maryland, you were on the scout team for 4 years. And a lot of times that's where people develop their coaching vision and dreams. Is that what happened for you?
Listen, 100%. I was going to school pre-med, and so I think it was one of those things where I had an easier time getting up at 6 a.m. for a basketball workout than an 8 a.m. organic chemistry class. And it was kind of in that moment where I was like, I don't think this is for me. And, I think that's where I credit Brenda, where she gave me an opportunity. And, I'm one of those where you give me an opportunity, I'll run with it. And I fell in love with it. I've always loved basketball. And, obviously, prior to that, I didn't really see myself anything outside of just playing. And so obviously from a coaching, from a video component, from a supporting the players that were on the floor, was able to find a niche, and, the rest is kind of history.
And you mentioned Brenda Freeze, one of the legends of coaching, and then you've been with Kara Lawson. You're now with Don Staley, who's impacted you in different ways out of that who's who of women's basketball.
Yes, very much so, and very fortunate to be around great leaders. And I think from each one I've taken different things, and I think that's one of the things I've been blessed and fortunate to be a part, of their programs.
What are your core beliefs in a program?
Well, I think servant leadership. I think you got to be servant minded. You have to be about others before yourself. You got to be about not allowing a job to be too small or too insignificant. I think that's some of the best leaders, where no task is too small, no task is too big. And then you can kind of demand or ask of the people that you're leading to do the same. The integrity piece is huge. And then, the growth. Growth comes in different ways, different forms. Some in wins, some in losses, some adversity, some when you're, through jubilation, when you're on top of the world. And so, I think having those 3 principles really lays a great foundation from a value standpoint.
With your resume and success, you've had opportunities before this one. What distinguished this as the right one, the right time, the right place?
Well, I don't know if there's ever like a right time per se, but I will say with regards to why Grand Canyon, I think that, the leadership and vision, President Mueller, and the direction of Vice President Jamie, you've seen their passion. I've got friends, across different platforms and things of that nature. And they've been here. They've seen the community. They've seen the involvement of the students, how much they pour into their basketball programs. You don't get that at a lot of places. You look at a university that has just about every major under the sun, and then when you talk about, job placement, and you're in a major market in Phoenix, I think there's a lot of untapped. I think the hard part is, obviously is I think it's on the cusp. The next level for this program, I believe, is being recognized on a national level. Um, and I think a lot of times you don't have the resources or the vision or the leadership in place, and this place has that. And so that's really what drew me to it, and really excited to get started.
And with the impending conference change, the transfer portal, what is the ability there to get to that level sooner than later?
Well, I mean, listen, that's the plan. Obviously, your lifeblood of a program is the recruiting. And so obviously we're going to get going with that, with the portal coming up here, opening tomorrow. But, I think the recruiting can change everything, but I also think it goes to scheduling, goes to, your community, goes to your student involvement, from an environment standpoint, like all that's intertwined. But, I do believe we're going to do our part, from recruiting, identifying, and bringing in the right players to help kind of lead us to that path.
So much about leading a program is relational, right? And
Yes.
contacts in the industry or within your team. WNBA player Shatori Walker Kimbrough said she would take a bullet for you. It's how do you get to that level with your players that they have that kind of trust and a belief in you?
Well, I say all the time that I got my basketball PhD. I didn't get a master's, but I got my basketball PhD when I went to the NBA. And obviously, I was really young, and I can't forget. One of the things that Coach Brooks taught me was, you may not know everything, but the one thing you can do and players respect is your time. That's how you show love. And, love comes in different forms, but your time. And when you give people your time, they know you're invested. When they know you're invested, they'll give you a little bit more or do a little bit more, or go a little bit further. And so that's my hope where, all of our players in this program feel that. And obviously you feel it from an administration, from an athletic department, by way of today.
You've been known to jump in a practice or two. You think, does the head coach still do that? Get in there and run some sets with them?
Hey, listen, I don't want to make any promise. Obviously, I got a chance to meet the scout guys where, they were phenomenal today. And, but, again, I do find that players typically go a little bit harder when a coach is involved, whether it's, defending or setting a screen. And so, I do think, again, any way that you're able to relate with your players, whether that's hopping in practice or hopping in drills, or heck, just rebounding or passing for them, like, they appreciate that, and again, it's another touch point of where they see that you're invested and you care.
The intriguing thing is that you've been in this building before.
I have.
You came with the Wizards for a practice in here. You came as a Rice assistant playing GCU, not knowing where your future would lie. But what impression did those two visits make?
Well, I think when we did workouts here, I know, we were a little disappointed that we were coming here at the time, when I was with the Wizards, and when we pulled up, we were like, "My goodness, this is a school," and then we are like, "Why haven't we ever heard of this?" This school obviously being on the East Coast, and the people were phenomenal, and the facility, we were like, "This is better than what we got at home," at the time, and obviously at Rice, when we came and played here, um, again, just the environment was awesome, location was awesome, the support was awesome, and again, I didn't think like, it wasn't at that moment, I'm like, "Oh, I wanna come here," but, obviously as I grew and moved around the profession, it stuck with me of, if there was ever a chance, because I do think, this place has everything that it needs to, be recognized on the national level.
Now imagine if there was any doubt about that when you walk in today and there's a restaurant, Havoc House full of people waiting for you and hanging on your word and wanting to meet you. What was the impression that sort of greeting made?
Listen, I was blown away. I know Jamie asked me if I was nervous. I think I was the most nervous getting out of the car when I was ear hustling a little bit of who was gonna be there and, the band and this, that, and the other. I was well outside of what I had in my mind. I don't know exactly what I had in my mind, but it wasn't that. So was so grateful that everybody was able to come out on a Monday, right? And we all know on a Monday you catch everything you missed on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So for people to take the time out, was really grateful.
All right. Well, welcome here. Lope Nation's happy to have you. Congratulations.
Thank you again. Appreciate it. Thank you.